What's up, agents? Welcome to VALORANT 101. This is your holy grail for all the VALORANT content. Before the video starts, quick reminder to hit the subscribe, notification and bell button for a daily dose of me, myself, Charlatan. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you and explain you how to set up the best VALORANT esports settings. I'm a former professional CSGO and PUBG player with 10 years of experience in competitive gaming. And before those two games, I also played Overwatch, Quake Live and CS 1.6 on a semi-professional level. So I know a thing or two about first-person shooters esports settings. This video will be split into 6 sections and I will timestamp them down below into description. First, I will cover how to find the perfect mouse sensitivity for you. Second, we will take a closer look at general settings, how to make enemies more visible, spot them like a professional and improve your overall in-game clarity. Third, I will explain you how to set up your key binds like a professional VALORANT player to maximize your in-game efficiency and be as fluid as possible when it comes to clutch situations where every millisecond matters. Fourth, I'm gonna show you my Crosshair settings, which is basically a copy-paste of my previous CSGO Crosshair. This is more of a personal preference, but I will explain you why do I personally use this one. Fifth topic will be video and graphics settings for maximum in-game FPS on both low-end and high-end gaming computers, and of course competitive graphics clarity. You want to have highest FPS while also being able to spot enemies easy and fast. And the last point will be audio settings, so you can hear enemies' footsteps and gunshots with clarity. So let's jump straight into the action. Let's start from the beginning and find your perfect mouse sensitivity. Being comfortable while aiming and hitting your shots is the most important part of every single FPS game. Sensitivity is impacted by 3 things, and those are your mouse settings, which are software settings, DPI and polling rate, and window settings, buttons, wheel and pointer options. Your in-game sensitivity settings, the number that you set up in VALORANT settings, and in-game FOV or field of view, which in other games is impacted by your resolution and aspect ratio, but in VALORANT it is fixed at 103. First, make sure that your mouse settings and software settings are the same as in any other FPS game that you've played. If you have a mouse that can change DPI and polling rate settings, you can change them in your mouse software or directly by pressing DPI button on your mouse. DPI is basically the speed of your mouse on the screen. If you flick your mouse from one edge of your mousepad to another, how many inches will your crosshair travel on the screen, or dots per inch. Polling or report rate is how often does the mouse report information to your computer. I personally use 400 DPI and 1000 Hz polling rate, which is maximum on my Logitech G Pro wireless mouse. You can use any settings that you'd like here and adjust your sensitivity later on in the game. You also want to check your Windows mouse settings. Go to mouse settings, additional mouse options, and here you can adjust your buttons, pointer options and wheel options. In the pointer options, make sure that you turn off enhanced pointer precision. This will turn off any unwanted acceleration and instabilities in your mouse aim. Now, once you've done all of this, let's move on to finding your perfect in-game sensitivity. There are 3 steps to finding your perfect sense in the VALORANT. First step, if you're coming from games like CSGO, Apex Legends, Overwatch or Rainbow Six Siege, there is the official VALORANT sensitivity equation, which will directly convert your sensitivity from other games to VALORANT. This is the formula for CSGO and Apex Legends sensitivity. You need to take the sensitivity from those 2 games and divide them by 3.18181818. If you're coming from Overwatch, take your Overwatch in-game sensitivity and divide it by 10.6. And if you're coming from Rainbow Six Siege, take your in-game sensitivity and multiply it by 1.2. But there is a problem with this system, and that is the 3rd impact on our sensitivity in-game, which is FOV or field of view. In the VALORANT, your FOV is fixed and it is at 103. So the resolution and aspect ratio settings are not the same as in other games. For example, you can play the game on 4:3 stretched resolution, or with black bars, or ultra-wide mode, or whatever you want, but the FOV is always going to be 103. In CSGO, PUBG, Overwatch and other games, you're able to change your FOV with your resolution and aspect ratio, which is not the case in this game. This means that in VALORANT you only lower the amount of pixels that is being rendered on your monitor, and in-game models, enemies and everything else will stay in that style of 103 FOV. So it makes no difference if you play on 16:9 or 4:3 or any other resolution, since the FOV is constant. I will do in-depth cover of this in the 5th part of this video. For now, this is all you need to know regarding your sensitivity settings. So you've set up your mouse software and Windows settings, settings, your in-game sensitivity, and you change your resolution and aspect ratio, which doesn't impact FOV, as I already stated. But your aim is still not perfect. What now? Well, now we proceed to the second step of finding your perfect sensitivity in the Valorant. Go into practice mode of Valorant and training map. Come into shooting range and spawn targets. Now place your crosshair onto his head and move left and right. Try keeping your crosshair as much as possible onto his head. If you are struggling to keep your crosshair on his head, try adjusting your sensitivity. If you are overshooting his head, try lowering the sensitivity. If you are undershooting his head, try putting these numbers a bit higher until you feel comfortable with your aim. Once you're able to perfectly track his head, you're ready to go. But if you are unable to find your perfect sensitivity here, we are moving on to our third step. Now we will try adjusting sensitivity with flicking technique. So you want to start aim training with bots and keep your crosshair in the center of this course. Try flicking the targets that appear on your screen with headshots, so use only one bullet per target. For this exercise, you can take any weapon that requires one bullet to the head in order to kill our enemies. If you feel that you are overshooting those targets, try lowering down your sensitivity. If you feel that you are undershooting them, try hiring up your sensitivity. Undershooting means that your crosshair is not even crossing over your targets, and overshooting means that your crosshair is going way beyond your target's head. One more thing that you can try is finding your perfect flicking angle. For example, when I flick my mouse from my wrist to the right or left side, in any game that I play, it is exactly 19 degrees. So if I'm entering bomb side, I can easily check corners and keep my aim steady and precise. If I flick my mouse from my elbow to the right or left side, in any game that I play, it is exactly 180 degrees. So if enemy is lurking and trying to kill me from behind, I can instantly flick my mouse from elbow to the right or left side and try to react as fast as possible. And I use this technique in every single game that I play. So you can enter CSGO or any other FPS game that you played before and try to see what are your flicking degrees from those games and translate them into Valorant sensitivity. Or if you never played any other FPS game before, you can try out my settings and my degrees, since they are pretty common for majority of the FPS players. I recommend you to keep scope sensitivity multiplier at 1, but if you don't like it that way, you can adjust it the same way as you did with your unscoped sensitivity. And invert mouse and cycle should always be turned off. Invert mouse changes the directions of your mouse axis, which is really unnatural for majority of people. And you should never cycle through weapons on your mouse wheel anyways, which I will cover in my third part of this video. Now hopefully you found your perfect Valorant mouse sensitivity and you're ready to go straight into the battlefield. Let's move to the second part of this video, which are general settings, how to make enemies more visible so you can spot them like a professional player and improve your overall in-game clarity. Text language, you can choose whatever you like. I don't care if it is Azerbaijan, Bangladesh or English, as long as you understand it. I've been testing enemy highlights color a lot, and to be honest, there isn't any real advantage to any of these. In my personal opinion, I think yellow deuteranopia or protanopia are the best, whichever you choose from those two. Both are the same if you don't have some kind of color blindness. Purple is really way too dark and hard to notice, and red is also dark and it can get mixed with blood effects a lot. So I'd recommend you to stick with yellow for the best visibility of your enemies. Mouse settings we've covered in our sensitivity part of this tutorial. Minimap is always a matter of preference and what are you used to. I personally love when my player model is fixed and when the minimap rotates. I use these settings because when I'm entering bomb site, I can easily see on the minimap if enemies are on the left or on the right side of my model and which corners do I need to check. Keep your minimap zoom as low as possible so you can actually see the whole map. Minimap vision cones should always be on and they show the current field of view of the players. They appear as a cone on the map in front of each player. And minimap size is always personal preference, but try to keep it as small as possible while still being able to see everything that is happening on the map. This is my personal favorite settings for minimap and I will probably use them forever in this game. Show map region names should also always be turned on. This option basically shows you the callouts of the place where you are standing at the moment and on your minimap. So you don't have to think if you are in A long, B short, long C, you just read your position straight from the minimap, and if you are the beginner, this will make your learning process of callouts much faster. Now, the most important settings for improving your overall in-game clarity and enemies visibility. Show corpses should always be enabled. When this option is enabled, on the ground you're able to see corpses from the dead enemies, which are pretty simple and without any vision obstructions. When you turn off this option, instead of corpses on the ground, you have those sci-fi holograms of dead players, which can cause rage and some unwanted situations. At some places, for example, when you're attacking A short, you will be unable to spot enemies and these holograms obstruct your vision a lot. So just keep this option on. Next, we have show mature content and show blood. Basically, this option enables or disables blood in the game. If it is disabled, instead of blood, you will see yellow sparks that are hardly visible on greater distances. Noticing when you actually hit the enemies is much easier with this option and blood turned on, and you will be able to gather more information for yourself and your teammates. If some enemy is low on health, health or not. Instability indicators basically show you if there are some kind of gameplay problems, like for example network lag. You can keep this option on because it is just a small set of icons that will appear in your right corner of the screen, and if you're having some kind of problems with server or gameplay, you will be able to react according to that problem. And the last option for this part of the tutorial is show bullet tracers. This option enables or disables the ability to see light tracers when shooting bullets from your weapons. This should always be enabled because it can help you realize where the enemies are when they are shooting through smokes, walls, Viper's ultimate or other vision obstructions. It has multiple usages. And that wraps up our general settings and overall enemies visibility. Now let's move on to the third part of this tutorial video, where I will explain you how to set up your keybinds like a professional Valorant player so you can maximize your in-game efficiency when it comes to the clutch situations where every millisecond and reaction time matters. I use WASD for basic movement. Default movement should always be run. I use walk on shift because that is the most used button for silent movement since days of Quake and CS 1.6. You should always unbind your jump from space button and bind it to your mouse wheel up or mouse wheel down. I use only my mouse wheel up, while my mouse wheel down is totally unbind so I can avoid accidental jumps, but you can bind it to both buttons if you'd like to. You should never use mouse wheel for scrolling through your weapons inventory ever. Bunny hopping in this game is really easy and it's really useful. If you plan to go pro in Valorant, you should bind your jump to mouse wheel 100%, and you should definitely learn how to bunny hop because it will help you a lot. Maybe I will do a tutorial on bunny hopping sometimes later in future. For example, this is how you walk through Sage's slow orb without bunny hopping, and this is how you can pass through this slow orb with just 3 to 4 jumps easily in a matter of seconds. I crouch on left control since I'm an old school player. You should always turn toggle crouch off. This will make your reactions much faster and your movement will become more fluid when you want to peek certain angles. Equipment keybinds are the most important ones. You always want to keep your keybinds where you can reach them with your left or your right hand, and you don't want to assign these keys to anything important for your gameplay. Fire and alternate fire are default for me. I assign toggle zoom level to space. This basically switches different zoom levels of your operator or op sniper. Since you're not going to switch them that often, space button is perfect for this option. Aim down sight and sniper rifle aim should always be on hold. This will allow you fluid movement, you will be able to perform quick scopes and much more. Toggle is pure garbage and will only slow you down. These options are default for me in any game that I play, and I think they are the best for majority of players. I equip spike and plant spike and diffuse spike on X because my thumb is always, usually free most of the time actually with these settings that I have. Cycle weapons should always be unbinded from any keys, it's useless. I drop equipped items on V since I don't use my thumb for jumping on space, and I also use this keybind in CSGO for dropping C4. Equip last used item is turned off for me. This keybind can be useful in some situations, but I still love using separate keys for all of my inventory. I inspect weapons on Y since it's a useless keybind for skins. Use object is on E for me as in any other FPS game, and I already covered my spike keybinds. I use abilities on 4, F, C, and ultimate on Q. First 3 abilities are basically vertically aligned, and Q is default button for ultimate in Overwatch as well. You want to keep these keybinds as close as possible and make some sense out of them. Try to keep some kind of a common sense, some kind of a map that you can easily remember. And lastly, I use spray on Z because I never use spray anyways. Now moving on to communication, which is the key part of every esports title. I use my first thumb mouse button for push to talk to both party and team, because when I am in a fight with enemies, I can easily press that button and give information to my teammates that I'm fighting enemies at that certain location, even while I'm shooting at them. And pings are binded to my second thumb mouse button for the same reasons. Radio commands I keep at grave accent, and radio command wheel is at T because I don't use them that much. I give all my information either through pings or I simply talk with my teammates. They're useful only if multiple people are talking and fighting at the same time, but to be honest, almost no one is paying attention at radio commands. And I keep all of the interface settings to default because they align with interface settings from CSGO and some other FPS games that I've played. To be honest, you don't have to touch those if you don't need to. They are perfectly assigned as per default. In this fourth part of the tutorial, I'm gonna show you my crosshair settings, which is basically a copy-paste of my previous CSGO crosshair. All of these settings are strictly your personal preference, but I will explain you why do I personally use this one. I think you should always use fluorescent greens crosshairs because it has the highest visibility and it doesn't interact with any other background colors in the Valorant. I personally don't like outlines and dots on crosshairs. I think you should have only one center point of your aim, so either use 4 outer lines like I'm using right now, or simply use only one dot as a crosshair. Also, don't make your crosshairs extra large. My advice is that they should always be smaller than enemy's head on a very close distance. And I made my crosshair as static as possible, but crosshairs with firing arrows can be beneficial for new players and beginners. With firing arrows, you're able to see when are your shots inaccurate, and it can give some useful information for newcomers to FPS genre. Now we reach the fifth part of this video tutorial, which are the best video and graphics settings for the maximum in-game FPS on both low-end and high-end gaming computers computers, and of course, competitive graphics clarity, you want to have the highest FPS while also being able to spot enemies easy and as fast as possible. We don't care about graphics quality, we only want those juicy FPS numbers and competitive advantage. In general, graphics right away turn off any kind of limiter on your FPS. Just go offline. You don't want to have any kind of limits on your PC performance, and we want as many FPS as possible at every single point of time. You should never play in a windowed or full screen windowed mode because you will always suffer frame loss. When you're in a full screen mode, your PC only renders what is happening on your screen and in-game. It will not render any kind of background activities or whatsoever. And now the resolution and field of view. I've already explained majority of field of view and resolution questions in the sensitivity settings part of this video, but now I will show you in practice what Riot Games did to VALORANT. In VALORANT, you have only one type of FOV, and that is 103, which means when you change resolution or aspect ratio, your FOV stays the same. You're able to play VALORANT on any resolution that you want, and any aspect ratio. Fill, which is stretched, or letterbox, which is with black bars. These options can be adjusted in your graphics card software, but FOV is always the same. In-game players, models, and everything else stays at 103 field of view. So models won't become larger or smaller, and your field of view will never change. For an example, in CSGO, your FOV directly is impacted by your resolution and aspect ratio settings. If you put 4:3 resolution in CSGO and stretch it, you lower down your FOV and in-game models become stretched, and for some players it is easier to aim at those stretched models. So there is no point of playing VALORANT on lower resolutions if you have high-end or mid-range PCs. If you have really bad computers, you can lower down your resolution so you can gain a bit more FPS for your game. For everyone else, stick with full HD 16:9 resolution. Changing resolution only blurs your image because your game renders less pixels. I've tested every single graphics quality option in this game, and to be honest, it all boils down to two questions. Do you want your game to look as best as it possibly can while still being able to spot enemies fast and easy? Then use these settings. Do you want to have the most FPS while still being able to spot enemies fast and easy? Then use these settings. Difference between those two settings in terms of game graphics quality is minimalistic. On higher end and mid-range computers, you will gain around 20 or 30 more FPS with these settings. While on the lower end and really bad laptops and PCs, you will see significantly more performance if you use these settings. I use them myself personally because I want to have as much FPS as possible at all times. I have 240Hz monitor, so I want to have in every single situation at least 240 frames per second. If you don't care about minor improvements in game graphic quality, which you will be unable to notice anyways, material, texture, detail and UI should always be offline, and they give you no in-game advantages. Vignette is pointless. Basically, it makes edges of your monitor darker, which is really bad if you want to play this game on a high competitive level. You want your screen to be as bright as possible. You want to make every single shadow in this game bright, so keep this setting off at all times. VSync synchronizes the frame rate of the game with the monitor refresh rate for better stability, but it also limits the in-game FPS to refresh rate of your monitor, so you should keep this offline at all times as well. For an example, if you have 60Hz monitor and you have 120 FPS in-game, when you turn on the VSync, you will be limited to 60 FPS in-game only, and you never want that. Anti-aliasing makes edges of objects and players in-game smooth and clean. If you have a high-end or mid-range PC, I recommend you to use some kind of anti-aliasing. But if you have low-end machines like laptops or really low-end PCs, keep this option off and you will gain significant frame rate improvement. I keep this option on maximum FXAA because the game looks much smoother and without distortion on edges for some competitive advantage. Filtering should always be at 1x no matter what PC you are using. This option improves render quality of textures, but it is so minimalistic, and by setting it at 1x you will gain a lot of FPS performance, especially on lower end PCs. Improved clarity should always be on, and it gives you clear view of some objects and models. Enhanced visuals, distortion and shadows you can feel free to turn off and improve your in-game performance. They are not important in this game. Shadows are extremely useless in VALORANT because player models don't have human-like shadows. Instead of that, they have basic circles underneath them, which is a great game design for a competitive esports title, and there is no shadow advantage. On the other side, in CSGO, player's shadow imitates real-life shadows, and in some situations, people will be able to spot your shadows even before your player model appears on their screen. So they will be able to expect you and get an easy kill, which is not the situation in VALORANT. So keep all the unnecessary stuff offline and get that mother effing frame points, boys and girls. And lastly, all the stats indicators, you should keep them off. Sometimes they will cause you to lose a lot of FPS and they will bug out. Also, you are not a freaking doctor and you're not monitoring your patient. You're playing a goddamn video game. If something is not working as it should be, turn them on, see what is the problem, fix the problem, and turn everything offline as soon as you fix it, so you can see and kill your enemies easier. Forget about your ping, GPU, CPU, FDA, FSU, Federation, BMU, BMW, Tesla, and other crap on your screen. You are not running a goddamn spaceship, and don't blame your internet and PC for being bad at this beautiful video game. And now the final chapter of this tutorial, audio settings. How to improve your audio so you can hear enemies' footsteps and gunshots better. First, you want to up that master volume to the goddamn maximum until your ears start bleeding. Sounds effects should also be up to the maximum. This slider controls how well do you hear gunshots and enemy footsteps. Voiceover volume should always be lower so it doesn't distract you from hearing enemies. Every single music, gameplay, and agent flavor, announcer, VoIP ducks flavor, everything should be turned off except tactical callouts. They are just distracting you from the actual game and they have no real purpose whatsoever. Voice chat options you should always customize up to your preferences. My advice is to keep it as low as possible, enough so you can hear and communicate with your teammates, but always prioritize in-game sound, footsteps, and gunshots. So far, the game audio is amazing. This is one of the best audio systems that I came across as an esports professional player. Both horizontal and vertical sounds are amazing, so you don't have to use any third-party programs or enhancers. I was able to clearly tell the position of my enemies even when I was using my $10 earbuds. So instead of investing money into your headset, invest your money in other peripherals, into other gaming equipment so you can get higher FPS or higher refresh rate, maybe a better monitor, I don't know, better GPU, better CPU, whatever you need. Just upgrade other things so you can have better experience in Valorant. And on that note, we've reached the end of this tutorial. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. I really put a lot of time and effort in figuring out all the settings and delivering this video to you. If something changes in the future, I will make sure to update you with the second part of this tutorial. But for now, subscribe, turn on the notifications and hit that bell icon so you don't miss any new content from me, myself, Charlotte, and I will do my best to keep you updated and entertained. Share this video and spread the word about this channel with everyone you know, it helps me a lot. Leave a like and leave a comment down below, your insight and opinion is always highly valuable. I always try to respond to every single question and comment that you make. In description you have other social media where you can follow me if you want to see me live stream or get notified about my future content. Or you can simply join my official Discord server and keep in touch with our whole community, my dear agents. I'm yours, one and only, Warden of the Valorant community. Thank you for watching and cut!